Hi, this is Janet Eifridt. In this video we're going to do QTS workbook topic 4, which is decimals. We're going to add, subtract, multiply and divide decimals. So let's get started. First of all, just quickly check that you can do your rounding. There's the instructions how to do it. Decide which is the last digit to keep. I usually use a line. If I would round to the nearest unit, I would think I need to draw a line here, because 5 is the last digit I want to keep. Leave it the same if the next digit is less than 5, and the next digit after the line is a 3, so it's less than 5, so that 5 before the line will stay the same. Now let's look the next one. Increase it by 1 if the next digit is 5 or more. So let's see, we want to round to the nearest whole number, to the nearest unit. Draw your line there. Look at the next number, it's a 7. In other words, it is more than 5, 5 or more. In other words, the 8 will become 1 more, so the 8 becomes a 9. Okay, pause the video, you try to do the rest. Can we just have a quick look at this one here? Rounding to 2 decimal places, 1, 2, so I draw my line here. The digit after the line is 5 or more, so the digit before the line would become 1 more. In other words, 21 plus 1 is 22, so 0.22. Round to 2 decimal places, next one, draw the line there, because I will only want to see 2 digits after the point. Let's look, there's a 5 after the line, in other words that's 5 or more. The one before the line will become 1 more, but a 9 will become a 10. In other words, look at 59. 59 would become 1 more, that is 60. So that is going to be 37.60. Okay, pause the video, try the rest if you haven't yet. I am moving now to the answers. And there's the answers, please check. Pause the video to check. I am moving on. Now, adding decimals. In the workbook I will give you practice on adding and subtracting, different pages. This is page 16, so before here you had lots of practice. I give you the grid to practice to put in, to line up your points really. So here you would write in the grid form 36.001 plus 58.33. Okay, so if you add this, you start here. 1 plus nothing is 1. We can put a 0 there as a placeholder if we like. Just because you won't have a grid, it's probably easy to leave a bit of space there and put a 0 there. 0 plus 3, 3, 0 plus 3, 3, 8 plus 6, 14, 5 plus 3, 8 plus 1 is 9. Okay, pause the video, you try to do the rest. I am moving now to the answers. And there's the answers. Lots of practice in the book. Click on the link below to download the book. Pause the video to check. I'm moving on to multiplying by 10, 100 and 1000. Now also practice on this. I've just put this sheet on here today. So you can say 5 times 10. I think most people would know it's a 5 and I put a 0 after it. You can also think of there's a point after the 5 and I move the point 1 space, which gives you the 50. So that will help you to do the next one. I have a number with a point, I times it by 100. I take the point, there's 2 zeros, so I move the point 2 spaces, 1, 2. My new point is after the 0. So it is 35260.32. Okay, I'm going to times with 1,000, so I'm going to move the point 3 spaces. It might help you to add a 0 in here. Okay, so move the point 1, 2, 3. The new point is here after the 0. So the answer is 870. Now, if you thought of the answer 0870, yes, the point isn't there anymore, but we never start with a 0 unless we need it just before the point. Yeah, so that 0 won't be there. Okay, for the dividing, remember every number have a point after it, an invisible point. If we divide by 100, our answer becomes smaller, so your point moves to the left. And that makes your answer smaller, doesn't it? 1, 2. So my new point is between the 5 and the 4. So it is 165.49. Okay. Look at this one, we divide by 10, just take that point and move it back 1 space. So my new point is between the 8 and the 6. 8.6352. Okay, pause the video. You try to do the rest. I'm moving to the answers. And there's your answers. Pause the video to check them. And I'm moving on now. Now, this is something a lot of students actually find quite tricky, to multiply decimal numbers. We need to follow these rules here. Ignore the decimal points and multiply the numbers. Count the decimal places in the calculation from the back. Put the number of decimal places in the answer from the back. Okay, let's check. 3 times 4 is 12. So if we do 0.3 times 4, we know that 3 times 4 is 12, so write it down. We write down the 12. Now we count here. There's one number after the point. In other words, from the back, 1 point. Okay, 3 times 4 is 12. There's one number after the point. So from the back, 1 and point. There's one number here after the point, there's one number there after the point. Next one, ignore the point, so 3 times 4 is 12. Now, how many numbers do we have after the decimal point? 1 and 2. There's 2 numbers after the point here. So from the back, 1 and 2, so my point is there, so I have 2 numbers after the point. And here is an example where we have a point, we don't have a number in front, so we need a 0 as a placeholder. Next, 3 times 4 is 12. We have 1, 2, 3 numbers after the point. So from the back we've got 1, 2 numbers, so we need another number, a third number, 1, 2, 3 numbers from the back. And then we have a point. Okay, now what do we need before the point? A placeholder of 0. Okay, pause the video and you try the rest. I just quickly want to look with you through this one. 250 times 0.03. What you can do first of all is you can think, what is 25? We're doing this one now. 25 times 3. And maybe you should know that is 75, whatever way you get that answer. 75. But what I really had is I had 250, so we can add a 0 there, which means we add a 0 there. But now, we need the sum to look like this. Not point, not 3. So you've got two numbers here after the point. So you write down your answer that you got by ignoring the point. Two numbers from the back, 1, 2, there. So your answer is 7.5. Now if you worked with money, you would say it is £7.50. If you work with something else, you can just say it's 7.5 because that 0 would fall away then. Okay, pause the video, do the rest if you haven't yet. I am moving now to the answers. And there's the answers. Pause the video to check. I'm moving on. Now, using the method I just taught you is a very good method to use, but it can also be a slow method in some cases. Therefore, I'm going to show you how to do an even faster method for the purpose of this test, where you only have a little time to work out your calculations. When you multiply by 0.5, you can simply halve the number. When you multiply by 1.5, you can simply calculate 1.5 of the number, and so on. So let's look at the example. If we think what is half of 24, most people know they just have to do 24 divided by 2, which is 12. So the method I taught you before to say 24 times 0.5, you had to ignore the point, say 24 times 5, which would have taken a bit of time, and then put your point back. So now we're just going to see this as a half of 25 when it is 0.5, because we know that 0.5 is 5 over 10, which is a half, isn't it? So just simply see it as a half of 24, which is 12. 24 times 1.5, that is 1.5. So in other words, you have a 24 for 24 times 1.5 of 24, which is 12. That, in other words, give you 36. So if we just can explain it down here, 24 times 1.5, you would split that up in 24 times 1 and 24 times a half. 24 times 1 is just 24. 24 times a half is a half of 24, which is 12. We add that up and it gives you 36. 24 times 2.5. You would say 24 times 2, which is 48. And 24 times a half, which is 12. And that added up gives you 60. Okay, pause the video, you try to do the rest. I'm moving to the answers. There's the answers, please check. Okay, pause the video to check, I'm moving on. And here we are going to do dividing a decimal by a whole number. Now this we have done before in the decimal division, in the division workbook for QTS. Simply we use the bus stop method and line up the points. What do I mean by lining up the points? We write 6.3 divide 9. 9 goes in 6, it cannot, so it's 0. And there's a point, so there's a point. And then 9 goes in 63. 7, isn't it? So your answer is 0.7. Okay, you have a go. Pause the video and try that. Just one more example from my side. Let's look at number 28 here. 0.11 divide by 5. Now remember, the first number, if it's smaller or bigger, it doesn't matter. The first one go under the bus stop. 5 go in 0, it cannot, so it's not point. And the points line up. 5 goes in 1, it cannot. And then 5 goes in 11 twice, isn't it? 2 times 5 is 10, so there's 2 remainder 1, isn't it? So you can use a placeholder of a 0 there. Any number can have a 0 after it. And we say 2 goes in 11. 5 goes in 11 twice. 2 times 5 is 10, so there's 1 remainder. 5 goes in 10 twice, isn't it? So that is 0.022. Okay. Maybe just one more. 0.I divide by 4. No, that is too easy for you. It's just simply 0.2. Okay, pause the video if you haven't. Try the rest. I'm moving to the answers. And there's the answers. Please pause and check. Remember, in the workbook you have lots of practice, so click on the link below to download the workbook. Okay, now dividing a decimal number by a decimal number. Convert the number you are dividing by a whole number first, then shift the decimal point. Okay, let's work through an example. 1.I divide by 0.03. Now, I don't know about you. I said to you the first one go under the bus stop. So, you could... A lot of students would try that, but I don't know about you, but I don't know my 0.03 times table. But what I do know is my 3 times table. So I don't want that there. I want to have a 3 there. Okay, and now we're going to think, how can we make a 3? 1.I divide by 0.03. We can write that as a line division. And then you can see it as a fraction. And now we can work out an equivalent fraction. And we can think, how can we make that a 3? We can make it a 3 by timesing by 100, in other words, moving the point 2 spaces. So you can times at the top by 100, moving the point 2 spaces, which gives you 180. And that looks like a much easier sum to do. 3 goes in 18, 6. 3 goes in 0, 0. So that gives you 60. Okay, maybe at this stage you want to pause the video and try to do the rest. I will run through another example with you. Let's try this one. Now, thinking of it as a fraction, with 2.4 line division divided by 0.3, we want this number to be a 3. How can we get it a 3? Times by 10. So we will times by 10 that one as well to cancel it out. So it becomes 24 divided by 3, and that gives us 8. Now remember, this is the answer. Don't confuse this with multiplying decimals where we put back the point. See it as separately. When you times decimals, you ignore the point, put it back. Yeah? And now this is a total different thing. When you divide, you get rid of the decimal point. And then you divide. You don't put it back. Okay, don't confuse the two. It's totally separate. That's the biggest mistake my students make here. Okay, pause the video. You try to do the rest. I'm moving to the answers. And there's the answers. Please pause the video and check. I'm moving on. Now we're just quickly going to do our checking sheet, which is everything I taught you so far. It's the roundings. Going to check if you can do it. Going to check if you can multiply your decimals. Okay, I am going to work through one of the examples with you, which is going to be this one here. 50 I'm going to ignore the point and say it's 50 times 6, yeah? Remember, we ignore the point and then we times. So we know that 5 times 6 is 30, so then we add that 0 onto it. So we have 50 times 6 is 300. But now we know that the point sit there, one number after the point from the back, the point sit there. In other words, the answer is 30.0, but you can say that is 30 because we don't need that point there. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. This one here, say 3 times 300 is 900. And then you look at the point, one number after the point, one number after the point, so there. It's 90.0, so you don't need the point 0, it's just 90, that's the answer. Okay, pause the video, you do the rest. I'm moving to the answers. Pause the video to check the answers. I'm moving on. Okay, now remember the fast multiplication method that I showed you. A half of 60 is the same as 60 times 0.5. Can you remember that? So that is simply a half of 60, which is 30. You can pause the video and try this first on your own, or I will work through this because it is so important. It will definitely come up in your mental math. You will definitely find sums where you can do this really quick method. 60 times £1.50. If there's 60 pupils that each have to pay £1.50 entry fee, you can use this sum. 60 times 1 and then 60 times a half, split it up. 60 times 1 is 60. 60 times a half, what is a half of 60? 30. And together it makes 90. Okay, so remember the 0.5 method you can use when you have something like 50 pennies. There's 630 students who each pay 50 pennies. So that is simply a half of 630. And if we work out what is a half of 600 is 300, what is a half of 30 is 15. So 315. Okay, 315 without the point there. 315, isn't it? A half of 630 is 315. Now what's really important, because that was pounds, this is pounds. Okay? If I say to you 630 times 0.5 pencils. Okay, now the 0.5 pencils does not exist. That is 315 pencils. If that was pencils, then that would still be pencils. It's the same thing. Okay? If that is pounds, that is pounds. And that is then just a number. Okay? So, if you have to say 630 times 1.5, do you want to try this one? Just the 630 times 1 is 630. 630 times a half is 315. And again, it is pounds, isn't it? So your answer will be pounds. You add it up and you get 945, and it is pounds. Okay, you try the next ones, and then we're going to look at a quarter. Do you know what's a quarter of 200? You can half it and half it again. Half of 200 is 100. Half of 100 is 50. Now, if I would say 25p times 200, you can just say that as a quarter of 200 and the answer is 50. Because we have pounds there, it is pounds. What about 160 times 1.25? And this definitely you need this for the test. This is very helpful. 160 times 1 is 160. And then can you see 0.25? That's a quarter. A quarter of 160. What is a quarter of 160? You can half it and half again. Half of 160. What is that? 80. And half of 80 is 40. Or you could say that is 160 divided by 4, isn't it? The first one go under the bus stop. 4 go in 16, 4. And 4 goes in 0, 0. Remember that was a placeholder there. So the answer is 40. So a quarter of 160 is 40. In other words, it's 200. I know from experience that my students find this quite hard. So 160 times 1.25, you split it up in 160 times 1 and 160 times 0.25. And a quick way to do that sum is to say 160 times a quarter. Okay? Okay, pause the video, you try to do the rest. I'm moving on to the answers now. And there's the answers. Please check. Pause the video to check. This is really important. This will make the difference for you to do calculations faster in that mental math. Okay, I'm moving on. And we're just checking your division again. And in this case, I just show you in the book, which you can download by clicking on the link below. I mix it up now. Division by a whole number, division by a decimal. And this is basically how hard dividing decimals can get. Pause the video and try to do the rest. I'll just have a quick look at this again. If we say 25 divided by 4, the first one go under the bus stop, doesn't it? And again, because it's pounds there, the answer is going to be pounds, whatever the first one is. If that was 220 flowers divided by 0.1, the answer would be flowers. Okay, so first one under the bus stop, so my 25 go under the bus stop, and it looks like that with a 4 there. Now you know that 25 can have a point, and well, if you like, as many zeros as you like you can put on there. It is still 25, isn't it? Okay, 4 goes in 25 how many times? It is 6, isn't it? We know that 6 times 4 is 24, so there is one remainder. And don't forget about your point there, that needs to be lined up with that point. Now 4 goes into 10 how many times? That is twice, isn't it? Because 2 times 4 is 8, and then we have 2 remainder. And 4 goes in 20 how many times? That is 5. Okay, so my answer is £6.25. That is when I divide a decimal. Although it looked like a whole number, I had to make it a decimal number, divide by a whole number. And we just looked at the other one. Let's look at this one here, the sum here. The first one go under the bus stop, but I don't know my 0.5 times table. I want to make it a 5 by timesing by 10, so I need to times by 10 here. That is 1230 divided by 5. First one under the bus stop. 1230 divide 5. 5 goes in 1, it cannot. If you want, you can put a little placeholder there to help you. There needs to be a number on every number, Very important to work very nice systematically here. If you struggle with your division, go back to my QTS division workbook, where I will give you grids to practice this until you can do it neatly. 5 goes in 1, it cannot. 5 goes in 12 twice, isn't it? Because 2 times 5 is 10, and then there is 2 remainder. 5 goes in 23. That is 4, isn't it? 4 times 5 is 20, so there's a 3 remainder. 5 goes in 36. So my answer is 2, 4, 6. And remember, you don't put a point back here, it is totally different from multiplying. Pause the video, try to do the rest. I'm moving to the answers. There's the answers. Please pause the video and check. I'm moving on. Now, as with QTS, you know that your questions is going to be word problems. So we've learned now how to do all the calculations with decimals. Now you have to read these questions. Decide what sum you have to do. Am I timesing, dividing, adding or subtracting? Decide what you want to do, and then you need to apply what you've just learned. So pause the video and try to do this. And there is the answers. Please check them. I just quickly will help you with a couple of these. 3.545 kilometers, pupils do 3 laps. So if you want to do 3.45 times 3, you will say 345 times 3, and then you would put the point back, won't you? But if you still times by 3, if you find that still easier, you can quickly go and add it together. Yeah? For when you times by 3, you can still add, but after that don't add anymore, then you don't have enough time. And that is then the answer you should get for that. In the next one, 90 pupils travel to an exhibition on 2 coaches. Each coach cost 180 to hire. The total entry fee for all 90 pupils was £90. Can you see that every person pay £1 because there's 90 pupils who paid £90. So every person pay £1. So the entry is £1 per person. Okay, and you have to work out what it is per person. So it's easier to do that separately. And now they travel in 2 coaches. Each coach cost 180. 180 plus 180 is 360, isn't it? So the 90 pupils paid 360. So you can say 360 divided by 90. What's an easy way to do this? We learned before that if you times both these numbers by the same number, it cancels out. We can also divide both these numbers by the same number and it will cancel out. So cancel those zeros, it becomes 36 divided by 9, which is 4. In other words, each pupil paid £4. And 1 plus 4 gave you the 5. Okay? In the next one you're going to times by 1.5, the £1.50, yeah? 62.5%, 62.5%. If you change the percentage to a decimal, you divide by 100. Move the point back 1, 2. It becomes 0.625. And you round this to 2 decimal places, the 5, make that one more. So it is 0.63. Okay? Pause the video if you still want to look at that. I'm moving on. Here, just a very quick sum. A very quick last thing we have to look at: 15 times table, 25 times table, 60 times table. Very important for this test, learn it, okay? Just the first four, okay, not the whole thing, just the first four. Yeah, 4 times 6 is 24 with a 0. This is going to be important for time. The 25s we use all the time, the 15s we use all the time, it comes up a lot. Here I just have different sums for you to practice. Pause the video and try these. Just a few quick ways of doing this. That becomes, you can cancel those zeros, so it's 54 divided by 9, which is 6. Ignore the zeros, say 53 times 3. 53 times 3, so it is 50 times 3 and 3 times 3. 50 times 3 is 150, 3 times 3 is 9, so that is 159. So 53 times 3 is 159, and then I have to add the 2 zeros. Okay. Next, 42 divided by 14. I know we haven't looked at this yet, but there's a lot of practice in the book. See this as a fraction line division. They both in my 2 times table. So half of 42 is 21. Half of 14 is 7. And now you've got the sum 21 divided by 7, which is 3. So that answer is 3. Okay, so whenever you have a division, you can see it as a fraction and simplify it. Can you see that in these ones? Let's just look at this last one. There's 2 zeros there. Those 2 zeros will cancel with those 2 zeros. So it becomes 180 divided by 4. And 180 divided by 4. Let's have a look. 4 goes in 18 4 times, isn't it? 4 times 4 is 16. There's 2 remainder. 4 goes in 25. So that is 45. Okay, remember that that is a quarter of 16. Now this is becoming a little bit more complicated. This is the most complicated thing I will do with you in this book. This is quite helpful to work fast, so very important aspect. 0.25 is a quarter, isn't it? So we've learned before it's a quarter of 16, which is 16 divided by 4, which is 4. Now what's really important here, if you have 25 times 0.16, is to understand that this will give exactly the same answer as that. Because here I would say 25 times 16, ignore the point, and then put two numbers after the point in the answer. Here I would also say ignore the point, 25 times 16, get an answer, and then put 2 numbers after the point in the answer. So it will give the same answer. So if you see this, you need to know that you can just do a quarter of 16, and then the answer is 4. Okay? If we look at this number 0.24 times 25, the sum here, can you see that that will give the same answer as 24 times 0.25? And that is much easier to do than that. That is just 24 times a quarter. And what's a quarter of 24 is 24 divided by 4, which is 6. So that answer is also 6. So you're going to change your sums to make it easier. And then even this is the hardest one. 0.75. Can you remember that is 3 quarters? 3 quarters of 28. That is 28 divided by 4 times 3, which gives you 21. That is will give you the same answer, that sum will give you the same answer as this sum. And in other words, that answer is also 21. Okay, if you don't get these two, I do find that students find this really hard, don't worry about it. Up to number 20 it is going to be most important. This is sort of an extra extension which is quite helpful. Just a last thing, if I have to say 240 times 25, I can have, it will be easier for me than to multiply this out. It will be easier for me to just think of 25 as a quarter. So I would usually put a point there and say that is a quarter, but then to cancel that, because what I really did was I divided by 100, then I need to times by 100 here, so yeah, so I add 2 zeros to that. So it is basically a quarter of 24,000. 24,000 divided by 4, and 4 goes in 24, 6, so it is 6,000 is the answer. So that could possibly be a quick way where you times, how you can times by 25. Quite tricky this, but if you don't get it and you find it quite hard, it is not the end of the world. You can still pass the test without it. It will take off a lot of pressure if you can actually understand this. Okay, pause the video if you want to try this again. I'm moving to the answers. And there's your answers, please check them. And that is then the end of this book. You can pause the video to check. I'm just moving to, that is my website name. If you want more books and more videos, please go there. And please click on the link to download the workbook. You can print off the sheets as many times as you like and practice. This works. My students who worked through these books found it really useful, and they mostly passed the test. Well, if they worked through the books, definitely they passed the test first time. Some of them failed first time because they were too anxious. But practice makes perfect, remember that. Thank you for listening.